So I've been reviewing the Canon 70D, and although I'm not ready to give my full review yet, I am very happy with this camera. It is a good camera. It is a nice step forward. That dual pixel autofocus, that live view autofocus is excellent. It's very, very good. And I can see a lot of use cases for it, and I can see people who don't think that they'll need it or aren't interested in it actually turning out to be very interested in it. But one of the things that I want to take a few moments and talk about are a few features that I've found in the Canon 70D that I haven't heard other people talk about or that I just found personally interesting. So I've got 5 interesting features here from the Canon 70D. So the first one is that the silent shutter mode, which is now an offering in the Canon 70D, that was not something in the 60D, is really silent. So here I am, regular mode, let's turn Q on, single shooting. This is what the shutter sounds like. Pretty straightforward. Now, we have, of course, high-speed continuous shooting. Let's just run through all of these before we get to the shutter speed. We'll build up that anticipation. Here's the high speed in the Canon 70D. Pretty fast. For comparison here, I have a Canon 60D. You can't see it, but you'll be able to hear it. High speed is just a little bit slower. Listen for the difference. So not a huge difference, but there is just a little bit of a difference. All right, and then we have a low speed continuous. Okay. And now we're getting to the more exciting stuff, our single silent shooting or silent single shooting. So let's listen to that. It's a good bit quieter. And of course there was next to that silent continuous shooting. I'm not using the touch screen to keep my fingers out of the way. I'm using the little directional pad over here. But the touch screen, of course, works just fine. Here's silent continuous shooting. It's pretty quiet, and I've been really impressed by that. Now, just a quick bit of information for you all out there. Most of the sound you hear when you take a picture in a DSLR is not the shutter, but it's actually that mirror mechanism flipping up and flipping down. I'll put a little waveform down below and kind of dissect that. Here's the sound of the initial mirror flipping up. There's the actual sound of the shutter. Then there's the sound of the mirror flipping back down. So that's the first one. Now the second is kind of back to the higher speed shooting right here, and that is if you're shooting JPEG only, which is not something I recommend because you're not going to get as much out of these cameras as others, but you can shoot just JPEG, and you can shoot with a really cheap card. A card as cheap as, these $12, $10, $9, 16 gigabyte. It's still a class 10, but it's down there at 24 megabytes a second. I've done this with class 6 as well. My point is you can still get about that with almost 7 frames per second shooting even with a cheap card. The write speed, the buffer is big enough that it will just do that happily for a really long time. Got the point. There's a cheap card in there right now. I could throw this card in there and get the exact same results. The card I recommend, though, if you're going to shoot RAW, it does matter. The SanDisk Extremes are a really nice price point and performance. You can go a little faster and get a little bit better results, but it's not a huge difference, so it's not really something that I would say is worthwhile. This is so we're on the third interesting thing here. That is the custom control menu is available right off the Q screen. I think that's really nice. And kind of along with that, when you're shooting any of the creative modes on the dial, those are your letter modes, back button focus with the AF on button, there's a dedicated AF on button, is on by default. That means that button back there is doing your autofocus. You do need to turn off the autofocus from the shutter button. I have done that already. See, here's metering plus AF, let's select it. Metering and autofocus. Start for the shutter button. No, I want it to only meter. And then, of course, take the picture. This is shutter button half press. Shutter button full press takes the picture. You can't assign that to anything else. But the AF on button being activated by default is quite nice, and I think that's right there. Next one we want to talk about is we need to switch over to video mode. And let's go into the menu is the easiest place to see it. We now have an option, and this is different from the 60D and the T5i, of your different frame rates. Frame rate's not really the best way to say it. Your different compression settings for video. So you have the All-I and the IPB for each of the standard settings, 1920 by 1080, of course, at 30 frames a second, 24 frames a second, 60 frames a second at 1280, and then at 640 by 30. I'm not sure many people shoot at that anymore, but you have the IPB. So what's the difference here? Well, there's not honestly a huge difference in quality. In fact, it might be very difficult to tell the difference. The real difference is the all eyes are much bigger file sizes. They go about compressing each frame individually. That makes editing easier and gives you a little bit more precise control over that. Whereas IPB compresses groups of frames, saying nothing has changed from frame 1 to frame 300. Let's throw compression across all of these. That makes editing a little bit more difficult. Now you might be thinking, oh, well, I'm going to edit my video. I have to do IPB. For all of the videos in my channel, almost all of them, I shoot in IPB. I do not need to do edits as precise as All Eye allows. Most of you probably won't either, but it's nice that that feature is offered here. Last option I want to talk about is digital zoom. Now, back in the days of point and shoot, and still now, people always said, digital zoom, terrible. And it's not a good thing necessarily, but it is interesting that they've added it back in the 70D. It's not available in the 60D. It's not available in the T4i or T5i. It is available in the T3i. What it allows you to do is during video work, I'm going to hit this button right here, and you go into the Q menu and you can touch right here, digital zoom. You have less choices than you did with the T3i, but it is back. You can jump from no digital zoom to 3 to 10x digital zoom. So once you select that and then you're in your zoom, you can simply zoom by pressing up and down, and it will show you over on the right your amount of digital zoom. Now, this is a interesting feature. I don't quite know how useful I want to make this seem. It is digital zoom. Your quality does degrade. Please don't think that you're going to be out there on the soccer field, or actually I should say way up in the stands, and taking close-ups of your kid kicking the ball into the soccer net, because as you zoom it becomes very difficult to stabilize the camera and your quality does go down. But there are some cases where using a really good lens, just a little bit of digital zoom is quite useful, and so I'm throwing that in there as an interesting feature. Here's a quick video I shot with a very stabilized camera using the 70 to 200, and we're going up to 3x and then zooming slowly all the way up, and you can see that we can get quite close, and I'll maybe even put up a map that shows where I am and how far away I'm shooting, and the total focal length when you multiply the crop factor and the digital zoom factor, it can really get up there, but again your quality is going to really get down there. So those are just some interesting features that I found in the 70D that as I've been reviewing it. If you are interested in my full review, please just subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions you want answered about the 70D that you haven't seen answered anywhere else yet. I have one. It's here. It's in my hand. Well, obviously you're looking at it right now, and I'd be happy to answer those. Also, the best place actually to answer the questions is over on Facebook. I do a better job of answering those questions. Just a few too many YouTube comments to keep up with on some days, and so your comment might slip by. I try not to let any of the Facebook comments slip by. Thanks so much for watching.